I begin reading at verse 20 and read down through and include verse 24. Matthew chapter 11, verse 20 down through verse 24. Let's have prayer. We still ourselves in your presence, Jesus. Deeply aware of the tragedy of today and mother that's hurting and friends that are distressed and the helplessness that we feel in the face of death. This is the third gentleman we've lost in our time together in embracing each other and trying to be the body. Doesn't feel good. It isn't to our liking. We consider it a waste. And we don't come tonight to ask why. We come to ask, what will you teach us in all of this? What do you want to do in us? And we know you are good, and you are always good, and you never do anything bad, and only good things come from you. And so we stare into the middle of all of this and say, oh God, what good do you want to bring to our lives? What do you want to say to us? How do you want to change us? What message is there we can glean from your lips? How do you want to affect our lives in this moment of sorrow? So speak to us from your word tonight. We are available. And bless us in this hour together. In Jesus' name, amen. It's been about 3 weeks since we have been looking at this passage, but the study is an overall study, actually. We looked at verse 20, Matthew chapter 11, verse 20, and we looked at that verse the last time we were together on this section. Tonight we're looking at an overall view from actually going to look from verse 21 down through verse 24. However, we really can't leave verse 20 out of it, so we're tying that in as well. We're calling this study tonight Light Responsibility. And it's not light in the fact of superficial. It's not light in the fact of the opposite of heavy. So it's not superficial responsibility. It's not light responsibility in terms of it doesn't matter. It's light in terms of truth. So what we're really dealing with in the passage as you come to this phenomenal statement, most of it, as you note, from verse 21 down through verse 24 is given by Jesus. So as you look at it, you note that it is not light in the sense of superficial, but it's light in the sense of truth has come. And of course we know that Jesus is the truth. So what you've really got going on is the truth brings heavy responsibility. And that's the whole focus of the passage. That Jesus is coming and He's presenting woes to cities. And as He presents these woes, it all revolves around the truth that has come to you. See, one of the great problems we have here is we know too much. We know way too much. We've been in too many services. We've had too much truth given to us. We've been exposed too much to Jesus. we have literally walked in His presence and felt His pressure upon our lives, and that brings overwhelming, heavy responsibility according to this passage. And that's what the whole passage is about. It's about the responsibility of truth that has come to us. And He's talking to 3 cities, Chorazin, Bethsaida, and Capernaum, that He's literally walked up and down their streets. He's done mighty works in their midst. The flow of the presence of God has taken place among them. And with that comes amazing, amazing, amazing responsibility. And He's calling them to that responsibility. The overall passage then is literally a contrast between the 3 cities of Palestine, where Jesus has literally ministered for 2.5 years, over against the 3 foreign pagan cities that have not known His presence at all. And He's literally contrasting these 6 cities, 3 with the 3, and the responsibility that is laid upon all of them. And as you get into the contrast, you realize that the 3 cities, the woes doesn't come to the 3 pagan cities. It comes to the 3 Jewish cities that have known His presence, which is really serious as far as I could see. Now, when you come to verse 21 down through verse 24, you are literally coming to the statements of Jesus. These words are coming out of His mouth, so this is coming from the heart of Christ. And as you look at this, it's very negative. And if you would just casually read through the book of Matthew, you would look at this and say, well, why on earth is He doing this? It's so negative. It's like He's down. It's like he's saying, hey, something has happened. And you get that feeling as you look at verse 20, then He began. So something is starting here that hasn't been before. And you wonder what it is that's got Jesus in this position, why He would be bringing the woes to the 3 cities. For instance, if you just back up, and these are obviously our passages that we've gone over, if you just back up, you see that He has really been popular, and fame has come His way. And you look at this and say, why is He now in this state of giving woes to the 3 cities? So that's where verse 20 comes in. Now in verse 20, you have to see everything that He said in light of verse 20. And we analyzed carefully verse 20. The subject, of course, of verse 20 is found in the word He, which of course is referring to Jesus. So again, everything that's going to spill out of in verse 21 down through verse 24 is coming from the very heart of Christ. And again, He's a Jesus who's been really successful. In fact, if you go back, if you just turn back a few pages and you go back to chapter 4, you come and there's kind of a summary of the ministry that is going on, and you're going to be moving into the great Sermon on the Mount passage. And in chapter 4, verse 24, it says, His fame went throughout all Syria, and they brought Him all sick people who were afflicted with various diseases and torments, and those who were demon-possessed, epileptics, and paralytics, and He healed them. Great multitudes followed Him from Galilee, and from Decapolis, and Jerusalem, Judea, and beyond the Jordan. That's not only Palestine, that's foreign cities, that's foreign lands like Syria were getting in on this. And His popularity was so strong, He was reaching beyond the borders of His own territory. And it just indicates that there were just phenomenal crowds and thousands of miracles being done. I mean, this is successful ministry, people, because everybody's responding, and His fame is literally sweeping the whole countryside. I mean, what else could you want, Jesus? This puts you on top. In fact, you'll remember in the Gospel of John, the crowds were so great they wanted to make Him a king. They were so impressed with what He was doing. They wanted to crown Him king. And how could you ask for anything better than that? I mean, this is acclaiming Him. He's famous. He's doing a great work. Ministry is taking place. Then you come into chapter 8 and 9, which we've studied, and in chapter 8 and 9, you've got all of these sample miracles. I mean, He's successful, folks. This is a Jesus who touches people and leprosy goes away. He speaks the words and people are healed clear across town. I mean, he stands in the middle of storms and just whispers and seas grow calm. I mean, this is a Jesus who conquers demons. I mean, this guy is is on top. There's no downer here. This is a man who's walking straight and who has everything at his fingertips, and he's conquering, and he's got it all together. Ministry is falling at his feet. In fact, in chapter 10, which we spent some time on, he has literally found that the ministry has gotten so big and he's so successful, he can't handle it all himself. So what's he doing? He's duplicating himself in the lives of 12 others. And he takes the power he contains within and transfers it to his disciples and says, you guys go at it. I got to have help here. So now he's literally multiplied his ministry by 12. And they're going out and they come back and they're successful. And man, everything is upbeat and everything is, wow, this is great. And whoa, this is successful. Then you come to this passage. You say, good night, what happened? He's pronouncing woes on the city. And as you look at this whole thing, you say, Jesus, you're so successful, but folks, that's from our view, not his. That's the way we measure it, not the way he does. He looks at everything we call successful, the fame and the popularity and the expansion and the wow and the miracles and woo. And he looks at all and says, oh, this is awful. This is not good. This is not what I want. We look at fame and big crowds and say, wow. He looks at big crowds and says, they're not getting this. They're not. We look at, you want to make me king? Oh, thank you, thank you, thank you. You want my autograph? We say, wow. He looks at that and says, oh, they're not comprehending what I'm saying. They're not understanding this. This kingdom stuff, they haven't bought into it, or they wouldn't be like this. They've missed it. And there's an absolute crisis going down in chapter 11. In fact, as you get into the chapter, you'll find out as we are getting into this section that this is a transition that's taking place from Jesus, who's saying, hey, I'm going to minister to the crowds. And he evidently had a great strategy of ministry. And it was that he would win the three cities, Chorazin, Bethsaida, Capernaum. He did most of his mighty works in these three great cities. And if he could win those cities, he would have an evangelistic base that would be phenomenal. If he could win those three cities. If he could win the leadership of Israel and they got on board. Oh, can you imagine what would happen? Leadership of Israel got on board, three major cities, with all the population of those three cities. With that base, it would just be absolutely beyond belief. And he could sweep into the whole world and win a Gentile world. And it would be his. The whole kingdom would come together. That was his dream, but it hasn't worked out. The leadership of Israel is trying to kill him, and the three cities have snubbed him. Well, what about all the crowds? Yeah. What about all the miracles? I know. What about all the fame? I know. But see there, touch my flesh, make me feel good, give me another free meal. See, they were in all of that, but they didn't get the kingdom thing, the thing he was really after. They didn't see it. They didn't buy in. And he realizes a crisis is going down in ministry, man. He's a failure. That really helps me. And in this crisis moment, he comes to give these words. Woe to you, Chorazin. Woe to you, Bethsaida. For if the mighty works which were done in you had been done in Tyre and Sidon, they would have repented long ago in sackcloth and ashes. But I say to you, it will be more tolerable for Tyre and Sidon in the day of judgment than for you. Isn't that strong? And you, Capernaum, who are exalted to heaven, will be brought down to Hades. For if the mighty works which were done in you had been done in Sodom, it would have remained to this day. But I say to you that it shall be more tolerable for the land of Sodom in the day of judgment than for you. Let's begin with the attitude of Jesus. You got to see this. If you miss this, you'll miss the heart of it. The attitude of Jesus. If you go back to verse 20, He is the subject. We've already established that. Began is the verb. He began. It's the Greek word archo. It literally means to rule over. It literally has the idea to be first. It means to start something. So the indication of the passage is that Jesus has not done this before. And if you search through the book of Matthew, you don't find anything like this. This is something new. He hasn't done anything like given woes up to this time. Oh, you're going to see it again in Matthew, and we'll deal with that. It's over in chapter 23. But this seems to be starting something in Jesus. Jesus' viewpoint, his view of what really is taking place in ministry is strangely different again in this passage. So something is beginning here that hasn't been up to this time. That's very definite. Now in verse 20, the word to rebuke, the Greek word to rebuke, translated to rebuke, is literally infinitive, which of course means it's to. It starts with to rebuke, and it depends on the main verb, began, and it has the same subject as the main verb. So he rebuked. There's no question about that. Who's doing the rebuking? The idea of rebuke here has the idea of disgrace, has the idea of shame. It has the idea that, and it gives content, by the way, to the word woe. So when you come to verse 21 and say, woe, and you ask, well, what does that mean? Well, you got to go back to the idea of rebuke, which gives content to the word woe of what he's trying to do here. So he's literally saying by rebuking them, he's literally focusing on the disgrace and the shame that's going on. In other words, I don't know if this is a good word or not. He's embarrassed. They have shamed him. They have disgraced him. That he's looked at the three cities in which he's done most of his mighty works. And do you remember that the mighty works is the Greek word dunamis, which is not just miracles. It's the whole idea of the flowing life of God in action. So that up and down the streets of these three cities was not just magic tricks. Come on. Up and down the streets of these cities was the very flowing move of the presence of God. That for 400 years, the presence of God had been absent. Now, in the person of Jesus, there was actually the moving flow of the presence of God hitting their town. Do you realize what a privilege? For 400 years, we've not felt His presence. Now we're feeling it. Do you really realize how radical that is and how significant that is? And it's going up and down their streets and in and out of their cities and the villages. These three major cities felt the presence of God. Man, that's significant. And in that presence of God that is now moving through them, the way they treated that brought disgrace to him, brought shame to him, it literally is the idea of being in pain. It's the idea that Jesus is saying, I'm broken, I'm hurt, you stabbed me, I'm wringing my hands in anxiety over you. I'm literally living in pain over you. I've been dealing this week with the second beatitude. Blessed are those who mourn. It's interesting. It's the same picture. There is a call in the kingdom to wring your hands, to mourn, to hurt, to suffer, to say, oh, you pain me. Isn't it interesting? In one of the epistles, the Apostle Paul was boasting foolishly. He said, I'm boasting about my ministry. It's foolish to do, but he says, you're tearing me down, and I got to boast of my ministry. And he gives this list of things that he went through, how he's the greatest missionary of all time, that he's suffered more than others, that he received the stripes on his back 3 times, that he was shipwrecked he was in the sea for a night and a day, and just on the list goes. And as he gave the stripes of God that have been brought to his back, and all the things he suffered for the kingdom, and then he comes up at the end of it and says, shipwrecked, lost in the sea, floating in the water, the stripes 39 times, 39 save 40 save 1, which would be 39 times. On my back, I think it was 7 times, wasn't it? I got that on my back. I went through the stripes, all of that, and all that was bad. But I'll tell you, he says, what tops all of that is the care of the churches. He says, you guys are killing me. Writing to the Corinthians. You guys are killing me, man. I've got this anxiety inside. I'm in pain. Jesus, that's the same thing that's going on in the passage. Jesus is looking these 3 cities and says, hey, I'm not mad at you. I'm not upset. I'm not mean. I'm not lashing out. I'm not beating you. I'm in pain. You embarrass me. You disgrace me. I would hope when Jesus thinks of me, he whelms up with joy. I'm proud. I would hate to think he's, Manley, you pain me, boy. Your attitude just stabs me, man. The way you handle that situation just, the way you responded, that's what's going on here. The word woe actually can be translated alas. I was interested in what Adam Clark said in his commentary. He said, it should not be translated woe to you. That's the way it's translated in mine. Woe to you, Korean, which is the idea of proclaiming judgment. Woe to you. He says the way it ought to be translated is alas for you, which has to do with pity, which has to do with, again, I'm not mad at you. This is not mean. This is not, I'm going to get you type stuff. This is, I'm hurting. I'm paining over you. I'm deeply disturbed. I'm upset inside. Come on, you 3 cities. Now, there's a parallel to all of this, and I want you to see, it's Matthew chapter 23. I'd like for you to turn there. The whole chapter it's a chapter that's in red letters except for the very first statement, the very first verse, which is, it's the last pronounced public sermon of Jesus. It's the last public message he's going to preach. And it has the 7 woes to the leadership of Israel. For instance, if you look at verse 14, woe to you, which is the same thing that's going on in our passage. Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites. Go down to verse 15. Woe to you, scribes, Pharisees, and hypocrites. Verse 16. Woe to you, blind guides. Go down to verse 23. Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees and hypocrites. Go down to verse 25. Woe to you, scribes, Pharisees, and hypocrites. Look at verse 27. Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites. Verse 29. Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees and hypocrites. Woo, he's on a roll, isn't he? I mean, you walk away from reading all that, and then when you get into the details of what he's saying, man, he's stabbing them, he's bashing them, he's whipping them, whoa. But here's the interesting thing. See, this is what saturation does for you. You got to saturate in the whole chapter and the context to get really what's really going on. Back up to verse 1. Then Jesus spoke to the multitudes and to his disciples. If you go to the end of chapter 22, you'll find out that verse 46 of chapter 22, no one was able to answer him a word, nor from that day on did anyone dare question him anymore. In other words, all day long the Pharisees and scribes have been at him. Now he's thrown them a question, and so nailed them with that question. They went slinking off, and they're not there. So he's not even talking to them. Who's he talking to? Verse 1. Jesus spoke to the multitudes and to his disciples. Well, why is he giving woes to the Pharisees, scribes, and hypocrites? Because he's saying, guys, don't be like them. Well, you say it's still a bashing. He's still going at it hard and heavy. But wait a minute. As you walk through chapter 23, come down to the close of it. Look at verse 37. Oh, Jerusalem, Jerusalem, the one who kills the prophets and stones those who are sent to her. How often I wanted to gather your children together, as a hen gathers her chickens under her wings, but you were not willing. This is not a bashing. This is, oh, I'm weeping over you. This is, oh, I care about you. This is, oh, guys, you're paining me. Guys, I'm wringing my hands. Guys, the shame and the disgrace. Guys, don't you get this? Man, you've walked in my presence. You've sat in the services. You've gone through this thing time after time after time. Man, you're killing me. I often wanted to gather you like a chicken, like a chicken gathers her chicks under her wings, like a hen gathers her chicks under her wings. And I'm not mad. I'm broken, guys. Now, the same thing is going on in this passage in verse 11. He's broken. And he's saying, how can I get through to you? What would it take, man? I did most of my mighty works. The very essence of the presence of God flowed in your cities. What would it take? You want me to do more magic tricks? What if I stood on a higher pulpit? What if I yelled more? What if I preached longer? What if I told more stories? What would it take? What would it take? What do you want me to do? Really strong, isn't it? The attitude of Jesus. Now, in the contrast that's going on in the passage, in light of the attitude of Jesus, I want you to see what bothers him the most. And it's the arrogance of the cities. Again, he's setting up a contrast in verse 21 down through verse 24. The contrast is the cities of Israel contrasted with the cities of the pagans. Now, the three cities that he's dealing with are Chorazin. And by the way, Chorazin, this is the only time in the whole New Testament that city is named. We don't really know where it was or anything much about it, because this is the only time it's even mentioned in the whole New Testament. But you would assume that it's right there in Galilee, which was not all that big, and you would assume that these three cities are clustered together and that he just went from one to the other and just kind of did a circle in these three cities. Now, the other city, Bethsaida, that's no problem, because that was the hometown of Philip, one of the disciples, and also Andrew and Peter were from that city. So we see that was a major city from which he got disciples and felt comfortable in. And again, the power of God was moving through those cities. Then the Capernaum thing, we have no problem with that one. We know Capernaum, because when he left Judea and after John the Baptist was put in prison and came to Galilee, he went to Nazareth and they tried to kill him, so he moved his evangelistic headquarters to Capernaum and established it in Peter's home to cut down overhead. So, that you got Capernaum, it's a major place, no question about that he's comfortable with, that Peter lives there, and that's where the miracle of healing the mother-in-law took place. In fact, when you go to chapter 8 and 9, when all the great miracles took place, sample miracles, we understand, but I think 5 of the 8 of those miracles were done in Capernaum. So this is major. You understand these 3 cities, they're not down close to Jerusalem in that sense. They're 80 to 100 miles away. They're in Galilee, but come on, they all have synagogues. They're all Jews. They have family life. They all go to church on Sunday. They all believe in the Messiah's coming. See, that's how the disciples got in on it. They became a part of John the Baptist and then transferred over to Jesus because they're looking for Messiah, because they all have that belief. They're all looking for deliverance. They all understand the Old Testament. They adhere to the prophets of old. They keep the laws of Judaism. These guys they tithe their money. They offer the sacrifices. They go to the prayer times. They believe in one God, Jehovah. They're straight. Now they're contrasted with these pagan cities. Tyre and Sidon. Go to a Bible dictionary, look them up. They're awful. They believe in many gods. They're a bunch of pagans. There's no question about that. In fact, in Ezekiel chapter 26 through 28, you can read about them. They're proud, full of arrogance. They're money mad. They're cruel. In fact, Tyre, according to Amos 1:9, sold Israelite children into slavery. Would steal the kids and sell them into slavery. That's awful. Bunch of pagans. Joel, according to Joel, the prophet Joel chapter 3 verse 8, Judah and the children of Jerusalem, they would steal, these Phoenician cities would steal these kids would make a trip clear down there to Jerusalem and Judea and steal kids out of there, take them captive at night and steal those kids and then sell them to the Greeks again into slavery. It's awful. It's awful. They're a bunch of wicked. But that's the contrast. Here's these religious people. Here's these folks that come to church. Here's these people that read the Bible. Here's these people that believe in the prophets. Here's these people that offer the sacrifices. Woe to you! Here's these wicked, no good, low down, pagan, who don't have any concept of God Jehovah and what we believe, and it's going to be better for them than for you. I can see you're not rejoicing over this. That sure is a mess, isn't it? I think I shared this one other time in a message, but it's worth sharing again. There was this was several years ago, maybe 10, 15 years ago, but there was, every place I was going to preach, somebody would come up to me seemingly like just every week and say, preacher, what we need is somebody to come here and preach about hell. Bless God, about hell. Our people need to hear about hell. I'm telling you, they need to know they're going to hell. We don't hear any sermons on hell. So I got concerned. Maybe I should preach on hell. I want to preach what God wants me to preach. And I'd hate to come up to the day of judgment and find out, I should have been preaching on hell and I never mentioned it. See, I don't want to do that. So I really got bothered about it. So I didn't know what to do. Should I or shouldn't I? Or, I didn't know what to do. So finally, it came through to me what I should do. I'm going to go to the New Testament. And that's what I did. Went to the New Testament, and I'm going to pattern my preaching after Jesus. Would that be okay? Whatever he preached on, I'm going to preach on. So, obviously, you go to Jesus and find out when, how many times, where, to whom did he preach in hell. It's really, really eye-opening. Eye-opening. For instance, here's the Zacchaeus scene. You know, this guy he's a thief. This guy is a Jew who is a cheat. He paid the bribes to get the tax collector position so he could cheat his own people. He's hated. Nobody likes him. He's ostracized. He's the worst of the worst. In Jewish thought process, this guy is as low as you can get. He's not worth spit if he's on fire. Don't even spit on him. That's how bad he is. And this guy, the nerve of the guy, besides that he's short. This guy, let's hear it for short people. This guy crawled up a tree. Come on, you sang about it in Sunday school. This guy crawled up a tree because he wanted to see Jesus. And Jesus is walking by, and Jesus stops right in the front of this tree, looks up there to this mean, nasty, cheating, no good. Oh, what an opportunity to talk about hell. Right? I mean, don't you just hold your breath and say, oh, he's going to get it. He's going to get it. That Jesus is going to lean into his face and, Zacchaeus, you're going to hell, boy. Zacchaeus, you better straighten up your ways or burn, baby, burn. I mean, Jesus is going to give it to him. Jesus is going to give it to him. Never mentioned it. Said, get down here. I'm going to your house for tea. Not coffee, tea. Here's a prostitute running homes, caught in the act, brought by the dragging of her hair, dragging her by her hair, popped her right in front of Jesus. I mean, there's no question. This is the opportunity. Set the home straight. Get this thing operating right. Woman, I want to talk to you about hell, lady. Selling your body, you're going to hell. Immoral, you're going to hell. I'm telling you. You never mentioned it. And every place you look where it would seem so logical. Well, when did he talk about hell? Board meetings. Sunday school teachers. Gatherings of preachers. What do you want to do with that? See, this is not... See the contrast? Here's the religious cities. Here's the cities that have felt his presence. Here's the cities where he's walked up and down their streets. Here's the cities where he's done most of his mighty works. Here's the cities that haven't felt the presence of God for 400 years, but now it's been unleashed in their very midst. Here's the cities that have heard his message. The cities that have laid their eyes on the truth of the wonder of God's redemption. Here's the three cities that offer the sacrifices, have had the voice of the prophets, have known the thundering message of the old-time men. These are the three cities that have, they got it together. Here's the wicked, the awful, the filthy, the pagan, Let me talk to you boys about hell. Whoa! Why? Because you know so much. You shouldn't have come here. You sat in the presence of God. You shouldn't have gotten in on this. Why? Because now you've been exposed. Now you see. Now His presence has come to you. Now, and with that comes heavy, 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 heavy responsibility. Whoa! Alas for you! You're causing me pain, man. And I'm telling you, he says, when the final wrap-up goes down, you'd be better off to be. In fact, one of the cities he mentions is Sodom. Sodom and Gomorrah, you know the story, Sodom and Gomorrah. Yeah, Adam or Abraham and Lot. Yeah, their sheep got multiplied. God blessed so much. And they were, of course, related, and it just became a conflict. Whose is and whose isn't and all that. And so Abraham said, listen, we really need to separate the flocks out. Here's the going to the mountains. Here's the beautiful valley with the cities like Sodom. You can choose. I'll let you have first choice. So Lot chose the valley where the grass is plentiful and the big cities, and his wife can live in the city and they can have everything they want. And so Abraham, he gets the mountainous. But then the whole deal begins to deteriorate because Sodom is awful and Lot's family begins to get into it and the influence of it. And God comes and says, listen, Abraham, I'm going to let you in on what I'm going to do. I'm going to destroy Sodom. And Abraham says, oh, whoa, you can't do that. Lot's there with all my relatives, and you can't do that, God. Well, I'm just letting you in on it. And Abraham says, wait a minute, suppose I find 50 righteous people in that city. Would you spare them? Would you spare the city if I find, well, God said yes, if you can find 50. He couldn't find 50. Would you go for 45, God? He couldn't find 45. Would you go for 40, God? Couldn't find 40. Hey, God, how about 30? God said, okay, couldn't find 30. Would you go for 20? Well, can't find 20 either. God, would you go for 10? Couldn't find 10 either. Two angels came down, visited the home of Lot. The men of the city saw the angels, banged on the door, demanded that those angels, not knowing they were angels, thinking they were men, demanded the men would be sent out so that they could do sexual activity with them. And Lot said, no, listen, I'll give you my girls. We don't want your girls, we want those men. That's how perverted the whole thing was. You know what he says in this passage? Here's Capernaum. Here's Chorazin. Here's Bethsaida. Oh, here's all the religious section. Here's the people who offer the sacrifices. They've got the prophets. They've had the presence of Jesus. Do you realize in the wrap-up of this thing, you'd be better off to have lived in Sodom? That's what he says. Because with truth, folks, comes responsibility. I'm crushed, Jesus. Because, hey, Chorazin, Bethsaida, Capernaum, those are my cities. That's where I've lived. I'm the guy that's gone to church. I'm the guy that's lived in your presence. I'm the guy that knows the book. I'm the scribe. I'm the Pharisee. I've said in service after service after service, you've moved, you've spoken. Am I causing you pain? Do you look at me and am I a disgrace to you? Does my attitude defile? Your name? And God, would it be all right if I'd put on sackcloth and ashes tonight and weep before you, saying, I am so sorry. All the truth I've heard and all you've done in my life and all the opportunities you've given me and hundreds of times you've reached out to touch my life. Where should I be and what should I be? Oh God, forgive me. Forgive me. Forgive me. Forgive me for every time I've embarrassed you. Forgive me for every time I disgrace you. Forgive me, oh God. Forgive me, oh God. Forgive me. For the day of judgment is not here. And I have heard and you have spoken and again today we've realized all over again the uncertainty of this whole thing. And tonight you're not mad at us. You haven't come to beat us. You're broken, wringing your hands, walking in pain, for we've disgraced you, shamed you. Would you accept my heartfelt repentance tonight? Heads are bowed. We don't have any sackcloth and ashes. We do have an altar. And if that embarrasses you to come, mercy, mercy. Think of what you've done to Him. Think of what you've done to Him. Think of what you've done to Him. You do not have the right to hear the truth one more time. You do not have the right to feel His presence one more time. You have already been blessed way beyond the pagan cities. You don't deserve one more opportunity, nor do I. But oh, He's come again. Woo, He's come again in His love, wringing His hands, calling you to Himself. I want to respond to Him again tonight.